Okay, let's dive right into a really wild idea. Have you ever thought about whether something could exist without ever having a beginning? I know, it sounds totally impossible, but there's a very strange paradox in time travel that suggests it might just be true. We're about to explore a concept so baffling, it makes you question the very nature of creation itself.
So this is our starting point, this single question. And look, this isn't just some fun little thought experiment. This thing challenges our most fundamental understanding of cause and effect. It really pushes the limits of how we think about reality.
To really get a handle on this, let's play out a scenario. So picture this. You build a time machine, and your #1 goal is to meet the legend himself, Albert Einstein. But when you get there, you don't find him in a classroom or at a chalkboard. You find him on a farm. He's just a simple guy who has never even heard of the theory of relativity.
So you're kind of freaking out, right? You're thinking you have to set history back on track. So in this moment of desperation, you hand him the very books and research papers that made him a genius in your own time. You just leave them with him, hoping it all works out.
And believe it or not, it works. He takes the information, he publishes the theory, it becomes world famous, and then, eventually, a copy of those papers finds its way into your hands, the exact same copy that you will one day take back in time to him. And just like that, you've closed the loop.
Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the whole thing, what we call the originless loop. Think about it. Who actually wrote the theory of relativity? It wasn't you, right? You just got it from the book. But in this scenario, it wasn't Einstein either. He got it from you. The information itself is just trapped in a loop with no real beginning. So this bizarre situation, it actually has a name. It's called the bootstrap paradox. You might also hear it called a causal loop, or if you want to get philosophical, an ontological paradox. It's basically any situation where an object or a piece of information is its own cause, just stuck in this endless, self-creating cycle. And the name itself is a fantastic metaphor. It comes from that old impossible saying, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's this idea of doing the impossible, just like the information in our paradox seems to create itself from absolutely nothing. This puzzle was brought to life for modern audiences by the sci-fi legend Robert Heinlein. In his story, a guy gets this notebook full of really useful info from his future self. Well, over the years, the notebook gets worn out, so he copies everything into a new one, and then eventually he gives that copy to his past self. So, who actually wrote the original notes? Nobody. All right, so let's get into physics versus the paradox. Because as mind-bending and cool as these thought experiments are, they seem to smash head-on into some of the most basic, fundamental rules of the universe as we know it. You and I, we experience time as a one-way street, right? First there's a cause, then there's an effect. It's a straight line. But the bootstrap paradox completely throws that out the window. It twists that line into a circle, a causal loop, where something in the future can actually become the cause of something in the past. Now, for physics, this creates two massive problems. First, you've got the law of entropy, which basically says things fall apart over time. That notebook should get older with every loop, the paper should get yellow, the ink should fade, and eventually it would just turn to dust, which would break the loop. And second, it just destroys the idea of causality. If something can exist without a first cause, then the very concept of an origin just goes poof. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if our whole common sense view of time is just wrong? We tend to think of time as this constant, universal clock ticking away at the same speed for everyone, everywhere. But modern physics tells us it's way, way stranger than that. Take a look at this number, 38 microseconds. It doesn't sound like much, right? But this isn't some abstract theory. This is the exact amount of time our GPS satellites gain every single day compared to us down here on Earth. And we have to correct for it, or the whole system would fail. Yep, because of weaker gravity and their incredible speed, time literally passes faster for those satellites in orbit. We have to use Einstein's theory of relativity just to get accurate directions to the grocery store. So my question is, if time is this flexible, could it be flexible enough to allow for one of these bizarre loops? So, the big question is there any way for a bootstrap paradox to actually exist without completely breaking the universe? Well, physicists have come up with a few wild theories. So let's take a look at how we might be able to escape the loop. Okay, so there are two main theories that try to solve this puzzle. The first one, let's call it Solution A. says the past is like concrete. It's set in stone and you absolutely cannot change it. The second one, solution B, says, yeah, you can change the past, but doing so creates a whole new separate universe.
The first idea is known as Novikov's self-consistency principle, and it basically says the laws of physics themselves will stop you from creating a paradox. If you try to go back in time to stop your parents from meeting, your time machine would break down, or you'd get stuck in traffic. Something would always happen to prevent it. In this view, you can't change history because you were always a part of it to begin with. Then you've got the second idea, which comes to us from quantum mechanics. It's the many worlds interpretation. This one argues that when you go back and give Einstein those books, you're not actually changing your own past. You're branching off and creating an entirely new parallel universe. So in that new timeline, yeah, he learned it from you. But in your original timeline, he still figured it all out on his own. The paradox is neatly avoided.
But there's this really fascinating third option that sits somewhere in the middle. Maybe you can't change the main event, but you can change its impact. So you can't stop a devastating plague from happening, but maybe you can go back and introduce the knowledge of hygiene to save a few more lives. You're not changing the core event, you're just mitigating the damage.
And this is where it all leads. We go from a puzzle in physics right to the ultimate question, the point where science bumps right up against philosophy. Because if these bizarre loops are even theoretically possible, it forces us to ask what time actually is. Enter the brilliant logician Kurt Gödel, who, by the way, was one of Einstein's closest friends. He created these mathematical models of the universe where time travel into the past was actually possible. And he argued that if such a thing can exist, even in theory, then our deep-seated feeling that time flows forward is nothing more than an illusion. His logic was actually pretty simple but powerful. He said if someone can travel into the past, they could witness events in a completely different order than we do. And if that's possible, it suggests that our sense of time passing might just be in our heads, a product of our perception, not a fundamental feature of the universe. Which leaves us with this final, absolutely staggering thought. If time doesn't flow, if the past, present, and future all exist at the same time, just like different places in space, does that mean our lives are already written? The bootstrap paradox isn't just a fun riddle about a book with no author. It's a doorway to asking whether any of us have any control over our destiny at all.